All right. Here we are for another VOD review of Gorgonzola. And this is going to be a big one. Um, One of the things you asked me here is a pretty big question, and you wanted me to be thorough about it. You want to know why. Why was it exactly that your team fell really quickly here? And why did, when you kind of did a similar thing with your team, why wasn't it as successful? Okay. And the deeper question of what you're asking me with that, um, you're really asking me to start diving into um, the sort of theory of macro fundamentals. And macro fundamentals is not necessarily a topic that is, um, how should I say, it's not really something that silver players think about or silver players even learn about. It's a pretty advanced topic. It's kind of where Overwatch starts to get interesting. And it really talks about the larger game at play. Okay. And whereas micro fundamentals might talk about your exact particular hero and how you play that particular hero, macro fundamentals instead talk about um, the whole game, kind of how a team plays, not just you in particular. What does the whole team do? Um, it's more about how do you understand the overarching details of the game. Okay, and so in order to tell you about, because I have watched this first fight and I've kind of watched your first push or whatever to compare, in order to talk about sort of the differences of those in a way that is meaningful, in a way that you can draw good information from it and look at other games and start kind of making your own analysis of it, is to sort of give you an introduction to macro fundamentals. Um, this is a pretty advanced topic, okay? And so it's going to take me a little while to explain this. I'll probably miss some things. You're probably going to have a lot of questions, um, but I'll just give it a shot. All right. So let's point our camera to like a sort of blank canvas, and let's just kind of pull out the pen. All right, and let's just kind of talk about macro fundamentals a little bit. Um, I'm not like super prepared for this. It's kind of a long conversation, so I'm hoping I don't miss anything. But okay, let's kind of just dive right in. Okay, the basic theory of macro fundamentals when it comes to team comps is, and I'll explain this in detail, all right, later. But just to give you just a start, okay, is that there are sort of three flavors of team comps, and you can kind of mix and match them a bit. But let's just think more fundamental. Think like a just clear your mind. Think of blank slate. Let's just say that there's three fundamental kinds of team comps, and one of them is going to be brawl. Let's put a B for brawl. One of them is dive. I'll put a D for dive, and another one is spam, and I'll put an S for spam. Okay, and the theory suggests that brawl will have a pretty good advantage against dive. Not that brawl hard counters dive, not that dive can't do anything against brawl, but that brawl is you should think of it as well positioned against dive. Okay, and that dive is well positioned against spam, and that spam is well positioned against brawl. Okay, and it creates this sort of triangle. All right, such that if you're losing, if you're playing, say, a Rhine comp, and you're all sitting together, you're in a nice tight huddle, and the enemy team is attacking you from a bunch of different angles and constantly pressuring you, and they don't seem to ever let off the pressure, and you're just getting hit at from a bunch of different angles, and Ryan doesn't know where to point his shield, and eventually you just run out of resources and die, and you're wondering, well, shit, how do I play that better? Well, the fact is, spam is well positioned against what you're doing. That's why you're losing. And so if you want to convert your comp to something better, to try to beat what they're doing, you would have to convert to dive to make yourself well positioned against the spam comp. All right. That's the sort of idea here. That's the kind of like idea. Does it always work in practice? Well, if you perform the comp correctly, it should. It should at least get you a good step in the right direction. Doesn't mean you're automatically going to win. It doesn't mean that if you switch to a Winston comp, you're all of a sudden going to beat the spam comp. All right. But it does give you sort of a strategic step forward. It gives you a sort of mental leap forward as well as kind of like, okay, here's a strategy that we could do. All right. Now let's break this down a little bit. What is brawl? What is dive? What is spam? Okay. Well, brawl, if I could explain it a little bit, all right, is going to look a lot like what you have here, sort of. Okay. What you're looking for in a brawl comp is, firstly, if you're really trying to build a brawl comp, what you're looking for is probably a Rhine. All right. That's a start. Okay. Because you're looking for close range. Think about close range, high pressure, close range. All right. Reinhardt. All right. Rhine. And then you want like perhaps a Reaper. All right. Notice how Reaper is his fall off is at 10 meters, so he's very close range. Ryan has a hammer. He wants to swing it at people. That's close range. You're looking at potentially May. All right. May's another good one because her freeze is kind of close range. She wants to wall people off to create isolations. And then you have off tanks that pair well with Rhine include both Diva and Zarya, both of which are kind of a close range combat kind of hero. Like they both want to fight people at a closer range. And then for other potential damage heroes, right? Instead of the Mei, maybe you're looking at Doom. Right? Doom actually works pretty well in a brawl comp because he can play very close together. He can stick inside the huddle. And another good one is Symmetra. All right, I'll put Sim here. When you're looking at supports, you're looking at Lucio is kind of like the main one. All right. Lucio works really well with the, I'm sorry, that was my bad mouse. Really well with the Reinhardt. Okay. Because Lucio's speed boost gets Ryan around faster, gets Ryan's hammer on top of the enemy core faster. And the other one that you're looking at for optimal results is probably BAP right now. BAP is a really good one. Okay. And why BAP? Well, because if you're all sticking really close together like this in a brawl comp, a close huddle, then Baptiste can heal the whole team with his shift. He can heal the whole team with his right clicks. And he can make the whole team immortal with his lamp. And that's just a lot of consistent healing, as well as lamp is just consistent, like reaction to whatever the enemy team is doing. Like lamp is just really good when your team is all sticking together and they can all utilize the power of it. And so this is kind of what a good looking, purely like brawl kind of comp would look like. Okay. And so let me tell you a little bit more about brawl. Okay. Let's kind of like expand a bit on this. Brawl, it sticks. Okay. It sticks. I'm going to try to write it out. Sticks. I'm drawing with a mouse here, so bear with me. Close together. Okay. Right? It sticks close together in a huddle. They're all right next to each other. When Ryan swings his hammer at somebody, everyone on the team can also attack that person. Okay. And that's really important. That's where the burst damage comes from. Okay. And so I would describe this as pretty high burst damage. High burst damage. But eventually falls off. Okay. Brawl can keep a lot of damage. They can keep like inputting a lot of damage on somebody. They can apply a lot of damage to an enemy team, but they can't keep it up forever. Eventually, you have to stabilize. Okay, so must stabilize. All right. You might hear this as stack on Rhine. You might hear this as let's stabilize behind corner real quick. What does it mean to stabilize? Is it means you have to get your cooldowns back, okay? Because you do have a limited number of resources here. While you can do a lot of damage, while you can make some pretty big plays, as the fight gets longer and longer, the amount of power you can output starts dwindling, okay? It starts dwindling down to a point where you just need to get your cooldowns back, okay? You just need to get them back. Like, as Zarya uses the bubbles, as Ryan is kind of out of shield and doesn't really have Fire Strike, Mei doesn't have Wall, Lucio doesn't have Amp, Bap doesn't have like Lamp, or maybe he's just, all he has is like Shift and then Reaper. You know, maybe he has his Fade or whatever, or his Wraith form. It's like you've used a lot of your resources, and at that point, you're looking kind of weak. You're very pushable. And so it's a good idea to stand behind cover, heal up, get your shield back, get your cooldowns back, and then make another push, right? That's the stabilize phase. That's something that's kind of part of Brawl. Brawl has to stabilize in order to get those cooldowns back, to get their power level back up to the top, all right? And if I were to draw this on a graph, okay? Let's draw a graph. And on this graph, this is power, all right? And this is time, all right? In the beginning of the fight, Brawl has a lot of power, all right? And then slowly you start using cooldowns, and your power kind of just like slowly trickles downwards over time. So eventually, on the power graph, all right, you're slowly losing power until you can hit that stabilize, all right? You stabilize, and then it kind of goes back up, and you can get more power. If you get all your cooldowns back, you get all that power back, and you can sustain even longer, all right? But we're not talking about after stabilizing. We're just going to look at power as the fight goes on, and it goes like on a long fight. This is kind of what you can see out of a Brawl comp, all right? This graph might look like, why are we graphing this shit? But as I add to this graph, it'll start to make more sense, okay? It'll start making more sense. Let's compare Brawl to Spam and Dive and look at how it kind of interacts with the graph, all right? So I'll pull out the eraser here, and I want to start getting rid of some stuff, all right? Let's erase all this. Let's erase this. Get rid of all this, but we're going to keep the graph, okay? We're going to keep the graph. Let's go back to here. All right, let's talk about Dive, all right? Dive, you're going to start with heroes that have mobility. And obviously this is not what I want. I want like this. Yeah, there we go. I want heroes with mobility. So redraw this line here. You're looking at mobility. Ideally, Winston. Okay. All right. Winston, and then for off tanks, you can play Diva. There's other comps, and we'll talk about them later, that would play potentially a Zarya here. And there's other comps that instead of Winston, you'll play a Ball, and we'll talk about that. But right now, let's just talk about like a more pure version of Dive, right? Winston, Diva, and then let's play, for example, let's play like a Tracer. All right, maybe a Genji. And for our supports, let's go with a Zenyatta and an Ana. Okay. So what does this comp do, right? What is this one about? What this one does is it's going to start in like kind of a huddle, It's going to start sort of sticking together. But as the fight actually breaks out, what's going to end up happening is Dive is looking for an isolated target to quickly burst down, right? So very high burst. This is very bad handwriting, sorry. Burst damage. All right. But it doesn't last long. Doesn't last long. And I'm going to write isolations here. Okay, so a dive comp is looking for an isolated target, like for example, maybe an enemy Zenyatta, who's kind of off on his own, alone in the fight, just somewhere, and they want to use their mobility to quickly jump on top of that target and kill them. Okay, so Winston can jump. He has his jump jet. Diva has her rocket booster jumps things. Tracer has blink. Genji has dash. And then Zen doesn't have to be on that enemy, just has to throw a discord on them and shoot them from afar. And Ana just has to be able to see the Winston. Okay, so that she can keep the Winston up as necessary, and she can also throw an anti-nade, and she can also nano the Winston, so that the Winston gets like a bunch of cleave, eventually gets primal, can nano the Genji for Nanoblade. So there's good synergy there. There's good reason why you could play Ana, and there's other options besides Ana. Okay, but that gives you an idea of sort of what this comp does. A lot of mobility allows them to find an isolated target and leap on them. Okay, and so what does their power curve look like? All right, in the beginning, when they're in the scout phase, they're scouting for an isolated target, their power is pretty low. They're not looking to do anything. Winston, did you know, does 50 damage when he leaps on top of somebody. When he lands on someone from his leap, it's 50 damage. He can animation cancel that with a melee and add 30 more damage to it. Okay? And so when he's not jumping, he's doing a lot less damage. Part of his burst, his very high burst damage, is landing on top of them. Okay? While Tracer isn't diving anyone, she's usually on the flank looking for somebody. Altogether, when you're not diving, when this team isn't diving, their power level's really low. But when they found a target, when they find that Zenyatta, for example, or that Ana, or that whatever is isolated, and they all choose to jump on top of it, it bursts really, really high. You get this massive peak. You fight them for a moment, and then it goes back down to low. Okay? So you get this very short window of time where your whole team can focus on one isolated target. Okay? And in that one moment, hopefully you can kill that target. If you kill the target, now you have a 6v5, and that's an advantage. You take that advantage incrementally, and you stabilize. You find another isolated target, and you do your next pounce on them, killing that target. And that's how dive sort of builds an advantage over a team fight. Okay? But you'll notice that in the beginning of the fight, before they find the isolated target, Brawl is higher on the power curve. Do you see how Brawl is higher here than Dive down here? This is the part where Dive has a problem with Brawl. It's also difficult to find an isolated target against a Brawl stack, right? It's really hard. If the whole Brawl stack, the whole Rhine comp is sticking really close together, no one's isolated. And so they have to put this whole power curve on top of the entire Brawl stack. And that includes like diving into a Reaper and a Reinhardt. And who the fuck wants to dive into Reaper Reinhardt, right? It's really hard. That is where the combat triangle sort of comes into play a little bit. Why Brawl is a little bit better. Okay? And what this power curve is showing you is that Brawl wants to take the fight really quickly. They want to just run into the dive stack and just fight them. their power in the beginning of this fight is greater. Winston hasn't leaped on top of them. Anna's too close to be like a threat from a distance, and the brawl stack can just tear through them. Their power level this early in the fight, it's just bigger than Dive's. It forces the dive sooner, okay? And the curve is just shorter when it's too soon, when it's unplanned, when it's impromptu, okay? And so that's a big way for Brawl to get an advantage against Dive, is to take the fight as quick as possible. But if Brawl is just waiting too long, if it waits for over here, for example, and uses a bunch of resources, and this is like post dive, well, they're actually kind of closer in the power. It's not as big of a gap between here and here. Now the gap is much closer, and both teams are similarly favored as the fight goes longer and longer against Dive versus Brawl. You want to win quick. You want to win quick as a Brawl comp. Okay? Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but let's see where spam lies in all this, okay? So let's kind of ditch out of this real quick. Let's erase some stuff. Okay. Let's get rid of all this and see where we are with spam. Okay. Let me go over here and I'm going to type in spam. Oh, not type, I'm going to draw. Okay. It's been 20 minutes. I hope you're doing okay. Let's talk about spam. Okay. So let's build a quick spam comp. And the way I'm going to build it is, there's lots of ways you can build this, by the way, but let's just call it like Arisa. And then let's say maybe like Hog. And then let's say Ash. Farah. I'm really good at spelling. Mercy. And Bap. Okay. So I'm not going to talk about other possibilities here. This is just one that would work pretty well with spam. Okay. What does a spam comp do that the dive and the brawl isn't doing? Well, mainly what spam is doing is it's applying, all right, applying constant pressure. All right, part of my bad handwriting. This says applying constant pressure. Another thing that they're doing is taking angles. Okay, they take angles. Oops. They take angles, preferably about 2 or 3, ideally 3. All right, 2 or 3 angles. They web their opponent. And then swarm. Okay. Another thing you can find them doing, another kind of idea you can put in your head, is that they pressure. All right, pressure. And well, that's a bad comma. Then claim. What I mean by this is a spam comp will apply spam pressure, a lot of ranged damage to the enemy team. And then after they apply enough pressure for a long enough period of time, the enemy team will start to run low on health, run low on defenses, run low on barrier, run low on like healing cooldowns, and they'll have to just back up. All right, they have to give up space, and that gives a chance for the spam comp to then claim that space. So first you pressure the enemy team, force them over a longer period fight to walk away, to take or to give up the space they have, give up their positionings, and then you as the spam comp claim that position. You've earned that by allowing forcing the fight to last a longer time. Okay. And so on the power curve, it's not a whole lot. It's not a very impressive amount of pressure, in the beginning, okay? But what's unique is that it is a constant on the graph, okay? It's constant. And what a spam comp wants to do against a brawl comp is play for the long fight. The longer the fight goes, the less the resources brawl has, the less power brawl has, the less of a threat brawl has. And they're facing against a constant pressure that won't go away. And this is how spam beats brawl. Okay. So, just a second. I'm getting text from my boss. I might have to just pause for a moment here. Okay. So, this power graph is something you want to sort of ingrain in your head and think about for a little bit, but don't get too carried away. Give yourself a lot of time to sort of consume what you're looking at here, right? Understand that Brawl wants to win the fight early, Spam wants to win the fight late, and Brawl wants to not fight in the beginning. They want to be safe in the beginning of the quote unquote fight. They don't want to take poke from the Spam comp, and they want to suddenly burst the enemy down, and they want to win the fight right here. Okay? That's what I want you to take away from this whole graph. That's the whole point of drawing this graph, is to give you an idea of when they want to win, like what point in the, like how they want to drag fights out and how they kind of want to fight. Okay, so we're getting rid of all that. Now, going back to this, Brawl versus Dive versus Spam. All right. So, Dive looks for isolated targets. Isolated, right? And they want to pounce on an isolated target and apply that damage spike to them. Why is Dive good against Spam? Is because Spam is attempting to take a bunch of different angles. Okay, a bunch of different angles. This could be, like, I'll give you another example of a much better Spam comp, by the way, of like Ball, Tracer, all right, Ball, Tracer, and they're going to be together on their own little angle. And then you have Pharmacy. Ooh, that was really bad. Pharmacy. All right, and I'm sorry for my handwriting. I'm writing with the mouse. And they're going to be on their own little angle. And then you can have Zen. Sorry, let's see. Zen plus off tank. Any off tank, right? And you can just be like, it can be a Sigma, it can be a Hog, it can be anyone. Just I'm going to say off tank. OT for off tank. All right. And they're going to be on a third angle. All right. Think about this, right? This is like a spam comp. This is where like Ball Tracer's on one angle, Pharmacy's flying up in the air on some other angle, and Zen and let's just for simplicity's sake, let's just say Hog. All right. Hog are on another angle. With these three separate angles, that what they're trying to do is to create a bunch of different angles of spam, angles of pressure to kind of make their pressure redundant. If you're able to withstand the pressure from the Pharmacy by putting a barrier in front of it, that means you're not putting a barrier in front of the Zenyatta and the Ball, right? And so there's, because you have a limited number of angles you can put your barrier in front of, or you can try to defend yourself from, the spam comp attempts to overwhelm you with angles and sort of swarm you into like a web of angles that you can't deal with. But in doing that, notice how the pharmacy has to be in a different location than the ball and tracer. And the ball and tracer are kind of in a different position from the Zen and Hog. And by kind of splitting yourself up in this sense, it's not a bad thing, but it means that you've done Dive's job for you. You have isolated yourselves. And that's how Dive is able to figure out that, like, oh, well, Zen's next to a hog. And while it's not fun diving a hog, at least all we're diving is a Zen and a hog. And if we have 6 people dive all 6 people dive just 2, we should be able to win a sort of like mini 6v2 really fast and then stabilize and start looking at the others, right? And so in that way, spam has a difficult time getting to the angles they want to get to and actually finding value, because as soon as they find these angles, then they probably isolated themselves and made themselves a target for dive. Okay. However, when spam does this to a brawl comp, brawl gets overwhelmed because brawl isn't trying to look for, I should say, brawl is a lot of times they are kind of looking for isolated targets that they can run to with the Lucio speed boost, but it takes longer. You know, Reinhardt doesn't have a leap. All they're relying on for speed is Lucio, and it's kind of hard for a brawl comp to do hardly anything against a pharmacy. And then as soon as they try to like get towards the Zen Hog, then Zen and Hog are just going to kite them. They're going to run away. And the ball and tracer can displace them and make them separated. Tracer can find their backline in the meantime, and it all works out in a way where this comp is really, really strong against a Rhine comp. Really very, very hard to beat as a Rhine comp, because it's just like everything you're fighting feels like a mosquito that you can't do anything about. And the only thing you can really do is try to kill the Zen as quick as possible. And you're just constantly dying as you try to get to him. It's really hard to stick together when ball is constantly displacing you. When tracer's constantly on your backline, you have to peel for the tracer. And so while you're peeling for your backline and trying to get rid of the tracer off of your Baptiste or whatever, the Zenyatta is just getting further and further away from you, and so now you've got a longer path to go to get to the Zenyatta, and it's just a constant uphill battle you're fighting. And in that way, spam is advantaged against brawl. And so I hope this kind of illustrates the sort of idea that there are 3 kinds of playstyles. There's brawl, dive, and spam, and there's kind of this sort of triangle in the conversation, how brawl is kind of good against dive, dive's kind of good against spam, and spam's kind of good against brawl. Okay. Not to overwhelm you, but there also are kind of there are sort of hybrid kind of ideas too, right? You can build a team comp that is kind of a hybrid between brawl and dive, where you have some elements of brawl and some elements of dive, and the team can choose to be brawly sometimes, and then when they want to, also be kind of divey. And while they're not as divey as a pure full dive comp, they're still kind of divey. So they can take advantage of some isolations pretty well. And they're still kind of brawly, so they can still fight close range with like some competency some of the time. And those are called hybrid comps, right? And there's hybrid brawls dive, there's hybrid dive spam, hybrid spam brawl. It all gets very interesting, all right? So that was 33 minutes of a very basic introduction to macro fundamentals. I hope that was somewhat useful, because now I'm going to start to kind of use that terminology to discuss what I'm looking at here, okay? So let's look at the game we're playing. What is actually happening? I'll let it start for just a second here. Okay. In the beginning of this game, all right, let's look at what we do have. What we have is a Reinhardt. And whenever you have a Reinhardt, you kind of automatically feel like a brawl comp. When you have a Rein comp, or when you have a Reinhardt in your comp, it feels like Reinhardt's is an important part of it, right? But then you paired it with an Orisa. And so while I'd say that Rhine is essentially a brawl hero. I'd call Orisa more of a spam hero, but Orisa's kind of a hybrid brawl spam. Okay, kind of a hybrid between the two, because while she doesn't necessarily want to play close range, she does have Fortify, and she can pull enemies away from her. And and that kind of makes it so that she's not completely ineffective in brawl. She's actually mildly effective. Okay. But Reinhardt is like basically all brawl. What you got here is a little bit of brawl and a little bit of spam. Okay. So a little brawl, a little bit of spam. Here you have brawl. Okay. Because she wants to play just close range and she wants to heal in close range. And she also wants to push her team forward, much like a Lucio would. Um, she can use her coalescence to just like spear her way, her whole team like into a profitable brawl. And then you have Doomfist, who's kind of brawl dive. All right, he can dive sometimes, he can brawl sometimes. In this case, he's probably just going to be focusing on the brawl side of things, but he might be doing some flanking as well. We'll see. And then you have you, who is on soldier, and I would say is just spam. Okay, and so let's add up what we got here. Brawl. How many brawls we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So brawl is 5. Spam is 1, 2, 3. And dive is 1. So I'd say in this, we are heavily brawl, kind of spam. So it's like hybrid brawl spam with mostly focused on the brawl side of things. What that means is that we still want to probably stick mostly together. That doesn't mean that you need to stick close together though. You still want to take an off angle, but like for example, the Moira and the Bap and the Rhine and the Orisa probably want to stick pretty close to one another. Okay. And the Doom is going to be on his own angle. It's not ideal, but it's like, it's kind of okay. Right off the bat, I'm noticing that the 4 that kind of want to stick together, for the most part, the 4 that like really want to stick together here are kind of far apart. All right. So that's one problem that you have right now is that you've already got isolations in your brawl comp, and they don't want to be super isolated, right? You can be a little bit isolated because you are that kind of hero that is like a really good spam hero. You can just sprint away. Even if, like, let's say you're here and you're kind of isolated, or you're here and you're kind of isolated. If you get pressured, you can just sprint away, all right? And not many people can chase you. And so that's what makes it so that it's like it's safer for you to be isolated on a crossfire and be shooting people because you're a very spam oriented hero. Whereas, for example, Baptiste, all he can do is jump really high in the air. He can't run fast. And so when he's isolated, he's killable. When you're isolated, you're kind of killable, but not as much as Baptiste. Baptiste having to lamp himself is a result of him having played maybe a little bit too isolated and a little bit too diveable, right? Doom is playing at an off angle right now, but what he's looking to do is surprise the enemy team with a big like slam uppercut. And ideally, he'd love to uppercut his enemy near his Rhine, such that the Rhine can kind of like get some hammer swings in there too, and that the Orisa can also get some shots in on them, right? And so he is going to be next to his team at some point, all right? But let's see what does end up happening, okay? All right. So the ball just immediately yeets himself forward, okay? Yeets himself up here, finds the Bap, finds the Moira, and decides to ground pound, all right? I want you to pay attention for a second to something very important, okay? Remember how I put ball in the sort of like spam comp category? Ball is kind of like spam / dive, all right? But in this scenario, he's going to play in a very spammy kind of way. When he runs in here like this and gets a ground pound back here, I want you to notice, okay, that Orisa, see the arrow here? This is the facing direction. That's a facing direction, and this is a facing direction. Look at the attention that he has, right? The focus that everyone is looking at him. And the healers here are specifically not looking at Reinhardt. And this whole team is about to shit on this Reinhardt, okay? Because the ball did this thing where he split focus. This is very important. Split focus. All right? Very important to split focus on the Brawl team to get a few people to look in one direction while other people are looking in another direction. When he does this, he creates an isolation. In this case, the Rhine is now isolated. As this Reinhardt, imagine how difficult it is to survive. Okay, let's watch this Reinhardt attempt to survive. Just throwing this out there. Now the Reaper has come onto point. Looking at these healers, Ball is kind of retreated away, but you can see now the Reaper is also splitting focus. You're focusing the Reaper. Reese is focusing the Reaper. Bap's focusing the Reaper. She's focusing Reaper. Who's helping Rhine? The Doomfist? Look at the numbers, right? If we were to pull out our pen and kind of like cut the map in half real quick. Cut the map here, all right? There are people fighting on this half of the map. There's people fighting on this half of the map, okay? This over here is a 4 versus 2. And this over here is a 2 versus 4. The whole point of the 2 versus 4 side is not to kill, but to split focus and survive. Both split focus and survive. Okay? Because if you can take a 2v4 over here and not die, while your other team takes a 4v2 with the intent to get kills and win, then ideally the 2 here die, the 2 here live, and what you're left with in the overall fight is a 6v4. And that is winnable. This is what a sort of spam comp wants to do. Now, is the red team playing a spam comp? That's a good question. I would say probably no. But just because you're not playing a spam comp doesn't mean you can't play in a way that a spam comp would play in, right? That's what's happening here. While Reaper's not a spam hero, he's doing a thing that spam heroes normally do, and that is split focus and survive. While he does want to kill the Bap, while he does want to kill the Moira, that's not the goal here. The goal is to take their attention and put them on him. Take the attention, put it here. Take the attention, put it here, so that no one helps with this 4v2, and the red team wants to win the 4v2. Now watch what happens. Okay, and so the Genji is now having a bit of a duel here, but you notice how the Rhine died. And so far, this is successful. Other things I want to point out that make this successful is notice how the Reaper is just out in alive. That's important. If he dies, it's feeding. If he lives, it's carrying. It's a big distinction, major distinction, okay? And the Ball, notice how he also lived. Again, that's carrying, not feeding. But if they died, then it's a 4v4, and it was feeding. Okay, not great. Okay, so let's continue. How's this Doom gonna do? The Doom died. Okay. Now, as I said, right? Now it is 6 reds versus 4 blues. All right? And notice how not only is it that, but look at the space we have now, right? So whereas before, towards the beginning of the fight, when you had like a Rhine here, a Doom up here, an Orisa here, Moira, Bap, and Soldier, right? In that scenario, in the very beginning of the fight, it looked like basically there was a line in the map here, and everything on this side of the map belonged to the red team, and everything on like this side of the map belonged to your team. But now the spatial difference, it cuts like right here, right? And so this all belongs to the red team. This all belongs to the blue team. right? Just something to be aware of. And now let's watch how this unfolds. How easy is it for a red team to win a 6v4? It's very easy, right? So now we're kind of gathering back. You decided to give up your position and just jump on the point and die. And these 3 people have come back to the fight. So far, it's still 6 people alive on the red team. And so this is not winnable as the 3 stack here. It's still going to end up being a sort of 3v6. It's right now, though, I will say it is only it's a 1v3. But these people are going to enter into the fight and stuff is going to go down. At least I imagine so. In my opinion, it's weird that it's not. Okay. Notice what the ball's doing. He's trying to split focus again. Right? He wants the Baptiste to not protect the Reinhardt. And you can see on the arrows, okay? Look at the Baptiste arrow, right? Looking this way, not looking this way. That means this Reinhardt versus this Reinhardt is a little bit more vulnerable than he normally would be, right? This ball does not have to kill this Baptiste to get value. All he's doing is turning the Baptiste around so the Bap doesn't heal the Rein, while this Rein gets heals from both this Ana and the Baptiste wherever he is. He's going to get there in a second, right? Objective lost. Just now, the Bap started looking back at his Reinhardt, all right? Just now. So Ryan gets some heals. Ryan walks out of line of sight of the Baptiste. And then we get red team dropping a big minefield in here. That's going to be pretty bad news for the Doomfist. Doomfist is now very separated and an isolated target from the team, though he was able to kill the Genji. And the Mortar might have a tough time in here as well. Yeah. Okay. So, let's take that now. That general, because now we have captured point A. That's how they did it. Let's go forward in time. Let's flip the map for a second. Let's compare your performance on attack. Your teams, I should say. Ready for battle. All right. So enemy team has a turret that's very defensive, kind of spammy, more of a spam thing. Mercy is a spammy kind of healer. The reason why I call her a spam healer is because on that sort of graph, right? That sort of graph of, holy shit, can I please? Okay. Of power over time. Mercy's healing is constant and never changes. It's just a beam that never changes, right? And so she is constantly healing. It's that constant power level that makes her on the spam side of things. Whereas BAP is also kind of a constant because when he's reloading, he can press shift to get that sort of continued pressure. And also he has big clips. Like he can shoot for a long time before having to reload. And that also makes him kind of spammy. It's a constancy. It's the constancy of it. Yeah. So they have that going on for him. They also have Ryan, who's he's kind of a little bit late, but I mean, no, it's not. It's 17 seconds on the clock. Let's go forward a bit. That was a 20-second jump. Okay. So you have Ryan Diva. That's very brawly. May, very brawly. So altogether, very brawly, right? This BAP can be considered spam brawl. This is kind of spam for the Mercy pick, and Torb's kind of spam. So overall, they're hybrid spam brawl. They're looking for a little bit of poke. That's one thing I didn't mention before. I knew I'd forget some stuff, right? A spam comp, all right, wants to have a poke phase, all right? Poke phase. This is a concept where you want the fight to start early, all right? Early. You want to be shooting and poking before the real fight begins. Before the Reinhardt, all right, meets the enemy Reinhardt, they want there to be a phase where your Torb, your BAP, and like your Mei are all just kind of right clicking. The turret is kind of just shooting. So like let's just think for a moment. Let's just look at this brawl stack sitting here, right? And let's imagine this whole team here was instead all playing here. Okay. And let's say actually more aggressive, like kind of like burying here, and they're all just like right here shooting this way. And this whole blue team has to walk through the spam in order to get to the enemy Reinhardt. Right? Do you see that? This would be a poke phase. This is where the spam team, or in this case, the hybrid brawl spam team, all right, is participating in a poke phase. Whereas this team, actually, I'll be honest with you, your spam looks better because you're a pure spam hero. You can absolutely spam with Hanzo. He's very spammy. This is very spammy. This is not, and this is not. But you have 3 elements of spam, so you are also hybrid spam brawl. They have 1, 2, 3 elements of spam, while these are kind of more brawly. And so they have 3 elements of spam. Both teams don't mind taking a poke phase. Wouldn't mind it. When you look at these two, what you want to figure out as to whether or not you really want to take a poke phase is who has better poke. Who has better poke, right? And in this case, I would say the range is better on these two than it is on like Torb and Mercy. Like what Mercy and Torb can do in a spam poke thing is not great compared to what these two can do. And then the BAP is just the same as the BAP, right? And so between the two, I'd say your team has more poke. And because of that, because your spam is better, you want a poke phase more than they want a poke phase. They actually don't want a poke phase against you, because if it's a fair poke where you're both spamming each other, you're going to spam better than them. And by spamming more, we go back into that topic of having that like power over time. You have that constant pressure, right? That's part of like the poke phase, is this constant pressure versus a brawly comp. You want the fight to last longer because your spam is better. Okay? Because your spam is better. You want to poke because you can break their shields faster than they can break your shields, and that depletes their resources. And so for you, on the graph of time, right, on the brawl side of things, yours might look like this and theirs might look like this. And so as the time goes on, your brawl is better than their brawl. It's a deep concept. I know this is very complicated. Okay? It's very complicated. But in these two comps, I can tell that your spam is better than theirs. So if you take a bit of a poke phase before you, like all as a team, jump in there, I think you would deplete their resources more than they would deplete yours in the same kind of like thing going on. All right. That's just to give you an idea of like what is a poke phase and do you want to take a poke phase? This is yes, you do. For the red team, it is no, you don't. How are they going to choose not to give you a poke phase? They're going to put their Reinhardt close to the choke. They're going to use Mei to wall you off, forcing a brawl right here on isolated targets. And so in that way, they are overcoming this disadvantage of having less poke in this sort of brawl mirror by using the Mei to force the brawl sooner and not take the poke phase. The wall automatically, this wall here that she's going to put up, is going to stop your poke from being effective. Okay? It's basically stopping the poke phase in its tracks and going right to the brawl phase. See this? Now they all are going to rush the Rhine. Both on the ground. Rhine should die here. Okay. Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right. Now it's a 5v6. So what do you do as the blue team? You lost your Rhine. What you want to do is stabilize, right? Maybe don't give up space for free, but there's a certain risk of like being a BAP and standing right here. You would want to come back around the corner. No one's protecting you. All they have to do as a team is just walk the BAP and kill him, really. And so best case scenario here is walk behind here or do an exo boot jump and get into the cinema. Ryan going in a little deep there, almost dying from it. So that pin, that was very risky. We throw up a wall here, which isolates 2 targets as the red team. Not able to do anything because the wall is a little bit past the choke. This choke point really represents like whose space is whose, all right? And so when you talk about like, if I were to draw a line here, right, and say, who does this space belong to? Belongs to the blue team. Who does this space belong to? Well, the red team, all right? And like anything in between, all right, like maybe right here is in between the 2 teams, and that would be considered neutral space. And neutral space is either contested neutral space or uncontested neutral space. In this case, it's contested. And so this is the space you're trying to contest for right now. Okay, this is the space you're trying to contest for. They're contesting it better than you, so you can't really walk forward at the moment because there's so much pressure on the choke. There's this wall behind here. You don't have enough damage pressure to move the enemy team out of it. And so they're contesting this space better than you, and you can't overcome it right now. It's really, really difficult for you. I'm going to go into another detail here. This might be kind of an advanced thing for you. So understanding then that if this is the sort of neutral space right now being contested and being fought over, what can you do as a soldier player, right? Let's go in the broader picture. Let's imagine that you as a soldier went out this window, flanked around this alley, and got yourself right here, okay? In this sort of like line between the 2 teams, here's the part that they're contesting over. And then here's the part where now you are standing in enemy space, but it's no longer enemy space. It's now kind of contested. You're contesting their space. And as long as they back up far enough and give you space, as long as they keep going this way, this space becomes your space. Okay, that becomes yours now. All right, as you shoot them and push them back, they can't really contest you up here except the D.Va. And if D.Va doesn't do anything about it, if no one does anything about it, this is yours. You've actually created more space for your team, right? And so your team went from having like this space to play with to having this space to play with. You see how much bigger that is? See how that's utilizable? Do you see how if you have this to play with on them and you just kind of like play the angles, you're playing in sort of like into like the sort of spam side of your comp, the spammier side, where you want to take multiple angles of pressure against them at the same time. And when you do that, okay, when you do that, they are inclined to focus on one. All right, if you're here, for example, shooting this way, the rest of the team is here shooting this way, they're inclined to focus on one or the other because their Rhine can only block one or the other. And so either they want to the red team all wants to push this and try to kill you here, or they want to fall back behind hotel and give you a shit ton of space. But you see how the Torb's sitting here? If they just kind of like match this and they're not really getting any kills or making any plays, the Torb sits here and you're over here, you just kill the Torb. Like the Torb's dead, right? Torb's not going to kill you. Maybe he kills you, but like let's hope he doesn't, right? This angle takes the Torb's attention off of the front line and gets him to start shooting you. If you start shooting the Baptiste instead, all right, then it gets the heals off of the main tank, and then your Rhine has a favorable 1v1 against the Rhine because you're getting more heals on your Rhine than they're getting on their Rhine because you've taken the focus off of their Rhine onto you. This is how spam creates advantage. It creates redundancy of angles. A redundancy of angles that even if you're dealing with one side of it, you're not dealing with the other. And that forces you to concede space usually. As a brawl comp, a good brawl comp though, would want to look at the space they're conceding and just recognize that if Hanzo's here and you're here and the enemy, like there's 4 people of the core on the blue team here, that they can just take 6v4 and win this. They can take 6v4 and try to win this fight really quick. They'll brawl it out. Brawl this out and try to make your positions here and here irrelevant. And then after they win this, hopefully they'll still have all their numbers, and it'll be these 4 dead, and it'll be 6v2. Hanzo here and you here, and then you can't really contest point, because if you go to point, they'll just run you over and kill you, right? That's what the Brawl Comp wants to do here in that scenario. But right now, you're just fighting for this space, okay? Let's see what happens. You're currently still playing on the low ground. Now you go up to Cinema. You kind of see this. In this scenario, they missed the wall on your Rhine, by the way. But they're 6 alive, facing down 4 people. The Hanzo doesn't really have a great angle on anything. So the Hanzo's not really even kind of a factor in this equation, unless he gets a little over more and maybe gets a shot on this BAP. Okay, that's what he's looking for. He's looking for another angle here. All right, so they put the wall up. They kind of force the Hanzo out. BAP's kind of jumping in the air and looking over, trying to see what shots he can get. You're now in the window over here, and you can see how the landscape of the fight slowly changes, right? And so now, I would split the map like this, probably, where, you know, this is the space that the red team owns, this is the space that the blue team owns. Overall, it's taken a moment, but I call it progress. This is actually progress for the blue team. You went from contesting this space to gaining it, to contesting like this space and gaining it, to now you've got all of this to play with. You've got a lot to play with now. So now you're either going to make this become contested space, or you're going to make this become contested space. You're going to choose which side of the fountain you want to work with. All right, or I say fountain, I meant statue. Let's see which way you try to go. Okay, so red team uses the window to make this side way more powerful for them. You don't want to stand in the window. It creates a spam lane of damage that does a lot of damage. Meanwhile, you're fighting a Mei up here. You're getting frozen. So she's contesting you on your angle, and she actually defeated you. And now with a couple of kills here, the red team looks like they've become successful. When they kill your front line, pretty much your whole team is going to be kind of completely rendered useless. Not entirely, but it's a pretty good indicator that you need to regroup. Okay. This Mei wall, I want to point out the fact that that Mei wall, all right, is important. Because if we go back to just a second ago when this Hanzo was alive, then it was kind of like the map was split like this. And it was like 4 people here versus, you know, whatever's going on over here. But as soon as she puts up this Mei wall, it's just a 6v1 insta-win. You can insta-win 6v1s, right? Insta-win 6v1s. And that's kind of what this serves to do. This dying kind of just means they're just clawing off time off the clock. Clock's not moving. You're kind of wanting to get your Hanzo to be part of this fight. Okay, so your team played slow, waiting for the Hanzo to come back. Hanzo has Dragon Arrow. I imagine Hanzo's going to throw Dragon Arrow straight down the middle here, and that's going to allow your team to walk forward. All right, let's see what happens. Looks like you're going up at top and trying to find another angle. Pressure out. You kill the Torb. That's good. Again, they use the wall to try to like separate the fight and create some space. The red team, or sorry, the blue team is going to use Coalescence, try to keep their front line up. There's a Blizzard that comes out. This is starting to become a very complicated fight with a lot of ultimates at play. There's definitely a lot going on there. I could slow it down and look at every individual little thing, but that would take a long time, and this video is already running a long time. I don't think, I don't know. I just don't feel like slowing it down and looking at every single individual person for that. But yeah, well played. You used your ultimates to take the space, and you got the kills that mattered. Excellent. So it took you a while, but you had to take space a little bit slower, right? You didn't have the ball. The difference between the two approaches was that in the first one, the ball was able to just roll all the way over here, pound here, and split focus 3 people. But when you attempted to split focus on your team, you didn't have the same kind of flank pressure. You didn't have the ball. And so eventually at some point you found yourself like going up on top of here, around here, and trying to do something over here. But notice how shooting from up here is not quite the same as ground pounding, like on the point, hitting 3 and like shooting the Baptiste directly and pulling his attention away. It was not the same sort of split focus. And while you can still get a little bit of split focus from here, it's not quite as strong. That's really where the approaches differed a lot, right? Is that difference that ball makes in terms of like splitting the focus between the teams. Okay. Other than that, I can take a break from all of the macro for a second and kind of just focus a little bit on your play. When I did watch I watched all of the defense on your defensive play. And the main things I noticed, if I'm going to look at, instead of macro fundamentals, if I'm going to look at mostly just like the micro fundamentals here, I don't know where the fuck my mouse is. There it is. Come on. The main things I've noticed, right, is like in the beginning here, I'm pretty sure I remember, damn it, these 20-second leaps are stupid. Right, and so I think you need to work on the Helix rocket lead timing, or I should say lead shot. I'm just gonna say lead shot, right? Shooting kind of ahead of where you expect them to be. Okay. Okay, so no one pressured you there, right? No one pressured you here. I don't see why you're rotating away from that position, because here you have a better vantage than you would have over here. I know someone at some point is going to start shooting you here if you do stand here, but no one has yet. No one has yet. And for that reason, I would have stayed on this angle. You kind of needed that pressure. Unfortunate that you walked away from it. Start looking over here. That's fine. We start pressuring the ball. We throw a Helix and doesn't really hit anything. We jump back over here, realizing that that angle doesn't give us anything. Okay, and so let's talk about something real quick, right? Go back here. Watch this for a second. I'm going to slow it down. Okay, when you're reapproaching this angle, all right, whenever you're a ranged pressure hero and you're trying to like approach an angle, okay, like look at my camera for a second, right? What I'm seeing right here, do I see any enemies? I see none, right? I'm not dueling anybody from this angle. As I go a little further, I'm seeing the Reinhardt, right? But no one other than the Reinhardt. So at this angle, I can pressure the Reinhardt and not worry about other people pressuring me. And when I say this angle, I mean this exact camera angle. As I go further, now I see the Genji and the Rein, but not the Bap, the Ana, or the Ball. And as I go further, just a little bit, now I can kind of see the entire enemy team, right? The more people I can see, the more exposed I am. And so when you're looking around a corner, consider the angles you're playing against, consider the number of people you're looking at, all right? And then watch yourself here. Watch how you expose your entire body to the whole team. Instead of playing the angle, you're playing the macro position. You're not playing the micro position, right? Micro positionally, I'd be on the edge here, kind of flicking around to see what kind of people I can find, not the entire angle. You don't want to peek around the whole angle, right? There's something I wanted to mention. When you're playing like Widowmaker, for example, and you're looking around an angle like this, one thing I would look for immediately is I would peek just this angle so that you're looking at the alley against any sort of enemy snipers sitting here, right? But just enough to see the alley, all right? Just enough to see alley first so that you take a duel against alley, and then if no one's there, go a little further to duel bottom of statue right here. You see the bottom of statue? See the slight nuance difference between this angle and this angle? You see how, like, as I approach the window here, I'm looking like first I want to see if there's a duel I can take here against a widow, an enemy widow, for example, maybe standing in the alley. And if no one's there, then I slowly increase the pan to include more angles. Because as I'm now playing this angle, notice how this is one of me versus two angles. And if I do this, now it's one of me versus like both left and right of statue and the alley. And if I do like this, if I'm looking like this, now I am having to worry about alley, left of statue, right of statue, hotel, someone coming around here, anyone on point trying to shoot at me. You can see all these different angles I have to deal with because I don't have the micro positional cover to handle all of them. Well, you as a soldier player should also be thinking like this in your head. Just be seeing like, if I'm here, I'm trying to peek like this, right? I'm looking at this. I'm looking at maybe like the Reaper and trying not to overexpose myself to this BAP who's kind of looking up at me. I want the BAP to kind of see the edge of my gun, but not my head, right? Because I can probably shoot at this Reaper without allowing the Baptiste to see me, right? And so start thinking about that, because this is just, it's very overexposing of your hitbox. And it's kind of why the Genji immediately sees you and takes this duel on you. And the Genji, by the way, when he came up here, he's used his dash and he's used his deflect. So you don't have to leave this duel, okay? You don't have to. You've got your healing pad down and he has no cooldowns. He can't beat you. You should hold your ground, okay? Good, you held your ground. Nice. You dodge on the fire strike. Again, very exposed. You can be more careful about this and just be more like looking to see who is going to expose themselves rather than like fully in, fully out. You can just like part in, part out, and just slowly find the view. Use crouch to go a little bit slower. All right, you don't have to be so quick about it. All right, here Genji has dashed it back in, and you jump out because you want to contest the point. You don't have to do this. If the point is lost, then would you rather lose the point and die, or lose the point and have like sprinting this way and getting like out and surviving? Right? You just want to survive. Dying there was a mistake. So you don't want to actually be dying there. Let's move on to the rest of this. Back a bit. Here, you kind of like, you see you second guessing yourself. Don't second guess yourself. Just go to the high ground. No need to second guess yourself here. Okay, and so you play this angle a lot. You want to be up here, and you're looking through this like lookout, right? What are you looking for up here, right? What are you actually trying to get out of this? Is you're trying to pressure from two different angles when it actually matters, okay? And so coming from like a top-down view. Oh, shit, that's not what I want. Oh, there we go. All right, let's look at from this view, right? Pull out the pen. If the enemy team is all right here, let's say they're all right here, right? And your team is kind of just where they are, and you're up here shooting at them. Is this a crossfire? I'd say no, right? Because if they're all right here, they can hold their barrier, if they have barrier, for example, in one direction. They're only being pressured from one direction, as another way of saying it. And because these people over here, they're not pressuring them. They've already got cover. They already got this cover here, right? They're not pressured from two angles because they're only really pressured from one. And for that reason, they can kind of just kite around. Like they could just go behind this like booth. They could go behind this wall and they could be out of your sights. And not only just out of your sights, but out of theirs too. And so that's something I want to let you know of. But if you wait a little while for their team to group up, for the team to start pushing in this way, where there's actually a big fight going on over here and just the Ana in the very back, now you have a crossfire, right? Because they're more committed. They're more committed. Right now, I call it low commitment. So you could give away the fact that you're up here right now, but why? This doesn't do much unless you get a kill. Now, if you get a kill, awesome. Like that, awesome, great. Now you can like back up a bit. Like you don't want to fight this Reaper, right? So you want to back away. Let the Reaper get bored of you. Let this Genji kind of get bored of you. Don't jump off the side there, okay? Go towards brewery. We call this brew or brewery. hide in here. They're not going to go this far. If they do, then you'll have the resources to probably drop another healing pad and maybe take the duel. Don't jump off the side if you don't have to. Okay. You want to go back up there and do it again now. You don't want to be down there. You want to go back up to where you were. And I'm pretty sure you do go back up there. This is a good angle. So this is crossfire. This is great. So the angle you're creating here, it's like there's a fight going on here, and then they have to deal with you pressuring from behind. So now this Rhine has to block this way and block this way, which he cannot do at the same time, and therefore you have successfully created a crossfire. So good job. That's what you wanted to be doing. Good timing, good place to be in. And this is a good ult. I'd say this is fine. I would say that you might have over ulted just a little bit there as a team. It looks like that was 4 total ults in that fight. And so you only want to use 1 to 2 ults to win a fight. You don't want to use more than 2. Otherwise, you start losing ult advantage. Okay, so I mean, this is fine. This isn't necessarily a crossfire though, right? So like I would split like the space of the map in half right here. So like this is your half, this is their half, right? And you're firing from the same angle that all your other team is. So I would love to see you go back around here and find this back angle again on the Ana. If you were there right now, you could kill this Ana and the fight's over. This is a moment where you see Ana's in the back, your whole team's up here, and if you were here in this moment, which you should be, right? This is where you should have been. This is the moment to apply your crossfire pressure. This is where you could kill this Ana and end the fight. And if you saved your tac visor, not only could you helix dink dink, that's all it takes by the way, dink dink helix. That's a 200 damage on the Ana. But then you could drop off the high ground with tac visor and tac visor from behind while the rest of your team is on this side. Again, playing into that sort of spam comp mentality where you overwhelm the enemy with redundant, like, spamming angles. You're webbing. You're doing this sort of webbing thing where you're being a presence on more than one angle at a time, where they can't deal with the pressure coming from like this side and the pressure coming from this side at the same time. They have to pick one, and they can't pick one, or the other one will kill them. That's what that would have done, and would have won the team fight for sure. Unless like Genji got really awesome play and just like killed you immediately or something. Okay, so he just forces you out. Some crazy shit's happening here. We don't know what the fuck's going on. You run away. Good kill on the Reaper. Okay, I respect it. You're gonna grab this thing. You're gonna try to run for a different angle. This is fine. Good kill. Good kill. This is huge. Again, nice angle. What you've done is you create a different angle, and it's a redundancy angle, so they couldn't defend from both directions. You're playing towards your sort of spam side of your comp, so good job. Okay, nice. Nice. Up your healing. You got this. That's not the direction you want to fall on. You're dead. Maybe. No way you live. That's crazy.
I could have sworn you'd die there. That's actually crazy. Okay, a little bit of running around. A little bit of weird running around everywhere. And you kind of had to go and do all that because you accidentally fell off the high ground. Just be careful falling off the high ground, I guess. Okay, and so we run back to our spot. And this is where we do the battle, right?
I've got you in my sights.
Now, I'll go play it for a little bit more. Okay. Why is it bad? Why does it just not work? All right. So your team isn't pressuring them from the opposing angle. Let's say your whole Rhine team, like Rhine Corps or whatever, ran through the apartments and flanked them this way. Okay. Then it would have been a good play. Let's say this whole team here, or I should say the whole red team, decided that they were going to rush main, and they were all going to exist here and have like a fight over here or whatever, and the Ana was in the back where she was before, then you could just kill the Ana and then attack Visor from behind. Now you've got this angle versus this angle. You're creating redundant pressure angles, and they have to choose whether they want to deal with the fight coming from the Ryan comp on this side or you on this side. And they can't do it because if they pick one, then they get killed by the other. That's the redundancy of it. But here, they just stare at you and hold up a shield and hold up an immortality field, and they just live. Right? The fight hadn't even started yet. The fight's not even happening. Right? They're gathering up. You want to wait until like the fight's actually been committed to. They haven't committed to any fight. They're just chilling. They're regrouping. And so you use this and it does nothing. It gets a lamp. That's kind of nice. That's a little bit of value. But then you have to determine whether lamp is more valuable to get out of them than it is for them to get out of or get the ult out of you. I think your ult might be a little bit more valuable than their lamp. And so I don't know if that was worth it. And that, honestly, that pretty much sums this up, right? And so you can go back and keep looking at this VOD and you can try to determine whether you're actually coming up with like really good angles, playing with into your sort of like spam comp kind of thing. I mean, that's kind of what I expect you to do. Or I could keep droning on and on about it. I could make this video last for 2 hours. I could make it last for 3 hours. I could look at everything, but I think that I've given you a lot of information here. And I hope it was helpful. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. I would observe a lot of the information I've given you, at least as far as all those macro fundamentals. I wouldn't worry too hard about trying to memorize all of it. In the future, if you're interested in diving deeper into all of that and learning a lot more about team compositions and everything, let me know and I can send you a pretty old spreadsheet. It's a Google Slides presentation that kind of goes over all of it, all the macro fundamentals and everything. You can like dive deeper into it and learn a lot more about it. And it'd be more effective than me trying to tell you over a YouTube video. But give it some time. Don't immediately jump into that. Give it some time to just like sink in and think about it and just ponder about it. And try not to rush into it because it's about this point in the game, right? This point in your Overwatch career where you start learning about these deeper things, these macro fundamentals, the things about the game that make the game more interesting, right? And what ends up happening, and this is like everyone's experience, right? They get mentally overwhelmed. They're thinking about these macro fundamentals for the first time. They're thinking about team comps, what team comps should do, what the enemy team's going to do, whether they're going to pressure from whatever angle or some other angle, or whether pressuring is a good thing. Do I want to take a poke phase? Am I taking a scout phase? Who am I diving? Where am I staging? What's going on in the fucking team fight? Like what is actually happening in this game? And that's distracting them from their basic mechanics. You're going to notice that as you start thinking about all these things, your aim's going to get worse. Okay? Your game sense is going to go down. You're going to forget to see certain things. You're not going to press tab as often looking at the things you need to be looking at. You're not going to ult track as much. You're not going to counterplay as much. You're going to just be thinking too hard about things that are just really advanced. And so that's why I'm telling you to take it slow. Because if you let it all come in at one time, I think that you're going to lose SR. It's what happened to me. I think it's what happens to a lot of people is they finally start learning a lot more about the game, a lot more about the fundamentals of the game. By fundamentals, I mean the advanced macro fundamentals of the game. And it kind of distracts them from just simply playing the game well. And then they end up losing some SR. They end up kind of having a bit of a fall off. And it sounds weird, but it just happens. And so I don't want you to like hear all this information and then suddenly be thinking about all this and then go down to like 1400 SR and wonder what the heck's going on. Just, keep playing well, take it in slowly, one step at a time. That's the best advice I can give you. Anyway, that's all for now, and I hope it was helpful. Let me know what you think, and have a good day.